with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we've been around for a long time. Our interest in broadband is really on making sure that networks are serving community needs first, looking at it as though it were an infrastructure rather than just another product that private markets supply. We just released a major report that has a number of implications for economic development, in which we drilled down into how Lafayette, Louisiana, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia built some incredible broadband networks, and what they've seen over the years as a result of those, and also some of the strategies that they've employed to make sure that they've succeeded. Around the nation, we have about 150 community networks that stretch across cities, connecting everyone, about half cable, half fiber to the home. And then there's a number of other communities in which there's some fiber optic network that's connecting businesses and may eventually be universal, but is not there yet. The chief barrier we have to these kind of networks is states right now, in terms of legal barriers. 19 states have barriers. These are sort of rough classification of the severity of the barrier. And you can see both of these maps online in an interactive manner at muninetworks.org/community-map. And as Nicole said, muninetworks.org is where I hang out regularly. It's where we put up a lot of stuff, and it's where we're trying to turn into a hub where people can go to find the information they need. So if anyone has any thoughts on how we can make sure it's answering the questions you all have on a regular basis, I would love to talk about it. I wanted to say 3 things that I don't know and 3 things that I do know as I was thinking about economic development and broadband more broadly. And one of the things I don't know is I don't know how much electricity comes into my house. I don't know the maximum amount of gas that comes through my gas line into my house. And I don't know what I would do with a gig tomorrow. Those are 3 things I don't know. 3 things I do know is that I have as much electricity as I need. I've never had a problem in my house of turning on appliances and finding I had to go turn other ones off. I could probably turn them all on and probably melt down my fuse box, but the point is that I have everything that I need. I can run my dryer, I can run my stove, and I can run my water heater on my gas. Never had a problem with not having enough gas. There's no one asking me, is there a justification for how much gas we push through into your house? And I would say, no, it's not a question we deal with. But the last thing that I do know is that on a regular basis, my cable connection does not meet my needs. I pay extra. I don't just go with the basic, but I'm regularly limited in my cable connection. Most often on the upload side is where I notice it. And so if you think about those sort of 6 things, the 3 things I don't know and the 3 things I do know, one of those things is not like the other. And I would say we're past the point where we can say that broadband is fundamentally different from electricity in terms of the needs of communities to have it for economic development, for quality of life standards, and that sort of thing. And so I'm not up here to say everyone needs a gig, but I'm up here to say that cable and DSL don't cut it. And if we're going to build something else, I think the thing that makes the most sense is fiber to the home, which is capable of a gig. When we built the electrical networks, if we did it like we have our broadband networks, no one would have air conditioning. And I think it's something to think about. There's a question in the broadband networks. I think we accept the fact that one community pays 10, 100 times more than another community for broadband, right? And in the business world, you can actually see disparities of 1,000 times in the number of cases. But, if your community had to pay an extra 10 times the amount of gas another community had, it would be crazy. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about how to do economic development when you're paying $40 a gallon. It's not a question that would come up, right? And so we looked around at community networks with the idea that probably community networks are doing a better job of serving businesses than the existing carriers, because many of the communities that built networks did it to encourage businesses. And so we looked at Monticello, Minnesota, about 45 minutes outside the Minnesota metro, or the Minneapolis metro, and looked at what they were offering businesses and compared it to the Minneapolis and St. Paul area, where theoretically there's much more density, there's more competition. And we found that Monticello was blowing it away. A lot of people look at this chart and they're not really sure what to take away from it. In general, you want to be as far away from the origin, the lower left, as possible, right? I mean, if you're going off to the right, you're getting faster downstream. If you're going up, you're getting faster upstream. And the smaller your dot is, the less you're paying. The point is just that these Muni networks that we've seen around the country tend to do much better services for the business sector and at much lower prices. So when we're thinking about broadband and economic development, I tend to focus on three keys. Speed is the one that everyone thinks of. Reliability is so important, though, and it's often forgotten. And then the other is affordability. We tend to assume universal access. It's really inappropriate, I think, to build a network and not intend to connect others. The fiscal realities is that you have to make a line somewhere. But we generally like to see these networks have a goal of connecting more people. And so a municipality probably should start by trying to connect everyone. And then I think there's a responsibility, particularly in more rural areas, to connect those around you because of the higher cost of connecting only those who are in the less dense areas. And then another thing that we think about a lot is accountability. It's something that Wilson, North Carolina, when I was visiting their network, Greenlight, which was fantastic, they said they were promising the strangle effect, which was unlike the existing carriers. If something went wrong with their network, you can find someone to strangle. They're right there in the town, right? And so the lesson for community networks is one of I think a lot of communities do it as a last-ditch effort. But I think more communities need to really start considering it because, as I say, help is not on the way. We know that FiOS and UVerse are done expanding. If you don't have them, you're not going to get them. We know that the federal government, state government's budgets are crunched. There may be some new programs, but they're going to be pretty small probably. And if you talk to people who have gotten federal money, you might want to consider the difficulty of dealing with the federal government and paperwork because it's a tremendous hassle. And I've talked to people who quite legitimately say they regretted it. And so I don't want to, I mean, these are good programs that are doing important things, but at the same time, there's a reality of dealing with the federal government. So we turn to Local Self-Reliance. It's our first alternative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And we've seen a number of successes from communities who have embraced this. I think the lesson, though, is, you don't need a gig. Chattanooga has a gig. It really helped them. But HomeServe moved to Chattanooga when the CEO was in town on a site selection survey. And they're looking for a place to locate. And they said, well, what are you going to do for us? And one of the things Chattanooga said was, well, the minimum speed on our network is 30 megabits a second. And the CEO, being a good CEO, doesn't really think about things in terms of megabits per second, turned to his technical person and said, what does that mean? And the technical person said, their slowest speed is faster than the best thing we can get in Miami where we're located right now. They canceled their other visits and they went to Chattanooga, right? 30 megabits a second is what did it. I just talked to another community that located 150 jobs from a high-tech company. They were asking for 20 megabits a second. They wanted it reliably, right? But we're not talking about the communities don't necessarily, these businesses don't need, a gigabit necessarily. What they want is reliability. They want a sense that you can meet their needs. And then there's other ways of looking at the value of these networks in terms of economic development. Spencer, Iowa talks about how because of their network, they track $1.6 million of savings in the community from lower prices as a result of them offering services at lower prices, but also the competition keeping their prices lower. $1.6 million a year stays in consumers' pockets. And, they say that's 40 jobs paying $40,000 a year every year in our community, basically. That's money that people are probably using to go into local restaurants. It's bouncing around the local economy. So it's an important effect, and I think it's important not to get lost in what Chattanooga does with its massive economic development staff. Most of you are not going to be having those advantages, but you can create the advantages of Spencer, Iowa. And there was one last thing. Just to get back to you know what? I'm going to go to questions because it's not that important. So feel free to contact me if you can't find my report. We made it available at muninetworks.org, and it's pretty easy to find there, I think.